Hey everyone, it's Bobby from Lyco Birds with another video in my Bird ID Through the Year series, and this one is going to be about common winter feeder birds. And I've been back and forth about whether to make this video, but I did promise in the intro that I would keep this accessible to complete beginners, so I did not want to skip out on this topic. But if you've been interested in birds for some length of time, there may not be too much new here for you, so I'm not going to mind if you skip out on this video. Maybe just hit the like button on your way out and make sure you're subscribed and promise to come back next time. And for those of you who are beginners, there's no shame in not knowing any of the information here. We all start somewhere, so this is a great place to get started. And when I hear winter feeder birds, one of the prime examples for me is dark-eyed Junco, or sometimes you'll hear them called by their nickname, snowbirds. Despite the fact that Sparrow is not in the name, these actually are sparrows, and the classic plumage for these that you think of is basically from a top view, all you see is dark gray, and then they have a white belly. They also have a small pink bill, and white outer tail feathers that you see flash when they flush off of the ground. And one thing to be aware of is that immatures and females can show various amounts of brown instead of gray. Next up is chickadees, and we have black-capped chickadee and Carolina chickadee, which are very similar to each other. Both have black on the top of the head and in the throat, and they have a white cheek, and then just generally kind of buffy and gray tones for the rest of the plumage. And typically you will identify these primarily by range. Black-capped chickadee is the more northern species and Carolina is the more southern species. So try to find out which is the expected species in your area, and that's probably the one that you're seeing. Now there are some subtle differences between the species that I'll briefly touch on, but if you're trying to identify one out of range, really you need to rely on a number of field marks, and the presence of hybrids can also complicate things. But basically, here's a couple of things you can look for. So on black-capped chickadee here on the right, you can see in the wings here, you have this little hockey stick shape made by the white edging in the feathers. And you can see that area here on the Carolina chickadee, you're not seeing that strong white edging. Also, if you look here in the area that we call the nape, on black-capped chickadee, this area is primarily white, and you can see there's a little bit of gray here encroaching on that area on the Carolina chickadee. So just be careful with these, and again, you probably just want to default to the expected species for your location. And then we have tufted titmouse. Now these are overall grayish, and they have a very distinctive head. So basically, they have a short bill, they have a dark patch in the forehead, and then they have this obvious crest. And really, the only color is just a little splash of this peachy color in the flanks. Everything has pretty much been gray so far, so it's nice to get a little splash of color. American Goldfinch is going to be the main yellowish bird that will come to feeders. It's not the only yellow bird that comes to feeders, but primarily it's the one you're going to see most often. Now they range in color from very bright, which this is a male, a little bit later on in the spring, but in the winter they're a little more of a dull yellow and kind of browns mixed in, and then they do have darker wings. And one of the things you want to look for on these to help rule out other options that could be coming to your feeder, you want to look for this conical bill, just your classic Finch type bill. And really, you'll see these enough that you'll start to get very comfortable with all of the different angles and as their plumages change throughout the year. And really, that's the main way that you start to pick up on things that are different. You gain familiarity with the common birds, and then when something uncommon shows up, you recognize that it's different. Moving on to another finch, this is house finch, and really the males are not really going to be confused with anything else that's coming to your feeder other than maybe purple finch, but purple finches in general are a lot less common, and I will have a video coming out in the next few weeks that will cover house finch versus purple finch. But for now, we're looking for basically red and brown in the plumage. You have brown in the flanks and in the cheek. And compared to purple finch, the top of the bill on house finch is kind of curved, like this top edge here. And the females and also the young males don't have any red in the plumage, so this is an adult male, and the others would fall into that female type plumage. But basically, they're brown and streaky, and they have a plain head, and also you can really see that curved top edge to the bill. Again, purple finch will be the main confusion species for female type house finches as well. And then we have house sparrow, which is an invasive species in North America. The males and females look a little bit different from each other, but both have a stocky build and a fairly large bill compared to what you think of for sparrows. And actually, these aren't really related to the North American sparrows, even though they are called sparrows. Male house sparrows have black in the throat and also in the upper chest area. And females have a less distinctive plumage with a plain underside and also this weak eye line that comes back behind the eye. In the winter, they generally have yellowish bills, but just be aware as it gets more into breeding plumage, the males will develop a black bill. And I think it's probably obvious, but I'll just mark these. So this is a male, this is a male, this also is a male, and this is a male, and all of the other birds that you see are females. Then we have Carolina wren, which you can see on these, there's some fine black barring here in the wings, and maybe it's a little more obvious on the tail. And that, coupled with this sort of long and slightly curved bill, is kind of what you look for on all of the wrens. And in terms of plumage, Carolina wrens have a rich reddish brown upper side and sort of a rusty wash on the underside and a bold white eyebrow. And as we move to slightly larger birds, woodpeckers of course like to come into suet feeders, and I just did 2 separate videos on woodpeckers, so I'm not going to cover these again, and I would just refer you back to those previous videos if you want to learn more about identifying woodpeckers. Next up is European starling, and this is another invasive species in North America, but they have generally a dark body, and they start out with their fresh plumage with all of this white spotting, but throughout the winter, the spotting actually starts to wear off, and by their breeding time, they are pretty much just this glossy kind of black with iridescent colors. Likewise, the bill transitions from being all black to gaining more and more yellow until ultimately it turns completely yellow. And structurally, you are looking for basically a straight bill and also a short tail. And these will flock up in large numbers, so a lot of times you'll see hundreds and hundreds together, or even thousands of them together. And almost everyone is going to be familiar with northern cardinal. They have a sort of large, kind of orange-red bill, an obvious crest, black on the face around the bill, and the males are almost completely red, and then the females are just kind of a warm brownish color with some accents of red sort of in the crest, and then in the wings and the tail. Likewise, I think blue jays are pretty recognizable. They have blue on the upper side and then gray on the underside, and they also have this dark necklace that kind of goes back around the back of the head. And lastly, pigeons and doves, of course, do also visit feeders, but again, I just did a full video on pigeons and doves, so I would refer you back to that if you want to learn more about the identification of those. Thanks for sticking with me till the end. Like I said, I was a little bit unsure if I should make this video just because I think it's not going to be as applicable to most of the audience, but I did want to make sure that some of these common things were covered sort of in their normal context because they are used so much in comparison to other less common species. So sometimes it's hard to do a proper comparison for a rarer species if you don't have a good base level of knowledge in the common things. There are plenty more videos to go in this series, so I hope you will join me next time.